At 2:17 a.m., the bank froze the card. At 2:27, my divorce lawyer filed the freeze, quietly, clinically, like he'd done it 1,000 times. And at 2:31, I found the second phone. It wasn't in a drawer. It wasn't under a mattress. It was sewn into the lining of a dusty leather satchel the police had returned like it was nothing, marked non-evidentiary. I cut the seam with a silver Cartier letter opener, the blade sliding through the expensive Italian leather with a satisfying rip. I pulled out a cheap burner, a black plastic brick wrapped in electrical tape like a final lie. Taped behind the battery was a yellowed list of dates, 10 years worth, and one sentence circled in red ink: Target acquired the Sterling estate. The silence in my Upper East Side library was absolute. The kind of silence that usually costs a fortune to maintain in Manhattan. But tonight, it felt like a vacuum sucking the air out of my lungs. I sat there staring at the handwriting. It was Dominic's, but it wasn't the looping, careless scrawl he used on our anniversary cards. This was precise. Block letters. Military. This wasn't a marriage collapsing. This was an operation. Planned, measured, and aimed at me. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I picked up my iPhone and dialed William. Madeline, his voice was thick with sleep. It's 3 a.m. Did he violate the restraining order? Tell me what the bank froze, I said, my voice steady, though my hand gripping the desk was white-knuckled. And tell me what it didn't. We froze the joint liquidity account and the supplementary cards, William replied, the lawyer in him waking up instantly. Why? Because if the freeze was the first trap, I looked at the Nokia brick in my hand. The second phone is the map to the rest of the money. Bring Marcus. Come to the house, now. 40 minutes later, Marcus was sitting at my mahogany desk, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his MacBook Pro. He was a forensic accountant who looked more like a hacker than a banker, wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than my first car. He held the burner phone with a pair of tweezers, inspecting the charging port. It's old tech, Marcus muttered, plugging a custom cable into the side of the device. No GPS, no apps, just texts and calls. It's a dead drop device. Drug dealers use these. Spies use these. My husband was neither, I said, pouring 3 cups of black coffee from the silver service on the side table. He was a charming social climber with a taste for expensive wine, or so I thought. William paced by the fireplace, looking nervous. Madeline, this is chain of custody suicide. If this phone contains evidence of a larger conspiracy, we just contaminated it. We should have called the district attorney. The DA will see a white-collar criminal trying to hide assets, I countered, handing him a cup. I see a mercenary. Look at the dates on that paper, William. I slid the yellowed note across the desk. William picked it up, adjusting his glasses. October 14th, 2015, he read. He looked up, frowning. That's the day you two met, at the Met Gala. September 20th, 2016, I pointed to the next line. The day my father had his stroke, Dominic was the one who found him. He was the one who called the ambulance. The air in the room shifted. William stopped pacing. The implications were hanging heavy in the room, suffocating us. If Dominic was a target acquisition specialist, then my father's stroke might not have been natural, and my marriage was just a long con infiltration. I lived with a stranger, I whispered. It wasn't self-pity. It was a cold, hard fact. I'm in, Marcus said suddenly. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The hardware encryption is surprisingly sophisticated for a burner. It's a 3-strike system. If I guess the passcode wrong 3 times, the memory fries itself. Can you bypass it? William asked. I don't have to guess, Marcus smirked, though his eyes were serious. People are creatures of habit, even spies. He typed in 4 digits, 1014, the day we met. The burner phone lit up. A green pixelated screen blinked to life. Got it, Marcus exhaled. Downloading the message logs now. I leaned in, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. I expected to see messages to Sienna, his mistress. I expected to see complaints about me, or plans for spending my money. Instead, the inbox contained only messages from a single contact labeled architect. Marcus opened the most recent thread. It wasn't a text, it was a coordinate. And then, the burner phone in Marcus's hand vibrated, a harsh mechanical buzz that made us all jump. A new message appeared on the tiny green screen, glowing in the dimly lit library. Architect, Phase 2 initiated. The asset is compromised. Burn the house. The printer in the corner of the library hummed, a rhythmic, mechanical sound that grated against my nerves. Marcus was cross-referencing the GPS data from the burner phone with my personal calendar for the last 10 years. October 14, 2015, Marcus said, not looking up from his screen. The phone pinged at the Pierre Hotel. 6 p.m. The gala, I said, staring at the rain lashing against the window. That's where we met. He spilled champagne on my dress. It wasn't an accident, Marcus replied. The phone shows he was positioned at the bar 40 minutes waiting for you to walk by. He received a text 2 minutes prior, target entering via East Wing. I closed my eyes. Every romantic memory, every serendipitous moment was being stripped of its magic and revealed as a cold, calculated maneuver. Scroll down, William said, his voice tight, to June 12, 2018. I froze. That date was etched into my soul. It was the day my mother died. The phone was active at your mother's hospice facility, Marcus read. 4 hours. He texted the architect at 2:04 p.m. Obstacle removed. My stomach turned. I remembered that afternoon. The nurses were on break. Dominic had offered to sit with her. He had handed me a cup of tea afterwards, rubbing my back while I wept. Obstacle removed. He killed her, I whispered. We can't prove that yet, William said, though he looked pale. But we can prove the infiltration. I pulled his HR file from the Foundation archives. Dominic was hired as a junior consultant exactly 7 days after the target acquired date on the list. The phone on the desk rang. It wasn't the burner, it was my personal line. The caller ID read, Correctional Facility, Collect Call. I stared at it. Answer it. William signaled, pressing the record button on his own device. I swiped green. Hello, Madeline. Dominic's voice wasn't shaking like it had been in the courtroom. It was devoid of emotion. Clinical. You shouldn't be calling me, I said. I'm just calling to tell you to stop digging, he said. There was no plea for forgiveness. You have the house, you have the money. Just sign the settlement I sent over before the arrest and let this go. You're in jail, Dominic. You don't get to make demands. I'm in a holding cell, Madeline. It's temporary, but if you keep pulling at threads, the whole sweater unravels, and you might not like what you find underneath. He hung up. The threat hung in the air. He sounded too confident for a man facing 20 years. He's hiding something specific, I said, standing up. Something he thinks is his leverage. William, get the car. We're going to the bank. 40 minutes later, we were standing in the private viewing room of the vault at the bank on Wall Street. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and steel. I need to access box 409, I told the vault manager, a young man who looked terrified of me. Mrs. Sterling, the logs show Mr. Sterling accessed the box on Tuesday morning, 2 days before his arrest. Technically, as a joint holder. I don't care about technically. I snapped, my voice echoing off the metal walls. Open the damn box. The manager flinched. I took a breath, smoothing my coat. Losing my temper was exactly what Dominic would expect. I apologize, I said, lowering my voice to that dangerous quiet register that terrified board members. My husband is currently in custody for fraud. I am trying to ensure the bank isn't liable for aiding in the dissipation of assets. Open it, please. The manager nodded, his hands shaking as he turned the 2 keys. The lock clicked. He slid the long metal drawer out and placed it on the table. I lifted the lid. The heavy brass corporate seal of Sterling Enterprises was there. My diamond necklace was there, but the blue leather folder, the one containing the original, notarized last will and testament of my father, which granted me controlling interest in the company, was gone. In its place was a single playing card, the King of Diamonds. Marcus checked the tablet he had brought with him. Madeline, check the surveillance log again. Dominic didn't come here alone on Tuesday. I looked at the grainy photo the manager pulled up on the security monitor. Dominic was there, yes, but standing behind him, holding a briefcase, was a man I recognized. It was Elias Thorne, my biggest competitor. The video playing on the iPad screen was a masterclass in manipulation. Sienna was sitting on the floor of what looked like a modest studio apartment, wearing a frantic expression and no makeup. I just wanted to be loved, she sobbed into the camera, wiping her nose with the sleeve of an oversized sweatshirt. Dominic told me they were separated. He told me he was sleeping on a friend's couch. I'm a victim here too, guys. Please stop sending me death threats. William paused the video. The frame froze on Sienna's tear-streaked face. She has gained 200,000 followers in 24 hours, William said dryly, closing the leather cover of the iPad. The public narrative is shifting. You're the cold matriarch. She's the naive girl who got played. She's not naive, I said, looking out the window of the black SUV as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. The steel cables sliced through the gray sky. And she's not a victim. The burner phone logs show she texted Dominic every day at 9 a.m. to check status. She wasn't his mistress, William. She was his supervisor. We tracked her to a coffee shop in Dumbo, a place with exposed brick, overpriced lattes, and too many people typing screenplays on laptops. It was exactly the kind of public, noisy environment someone chooses when they're afraid of a private confrontation. I walked in. I was wearing a charcoal wool coat and dark sunglasses. The conversation in the shop didn't stop, but the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Sienna was in the back corner, thumbing through her phone. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. "I'm calling the police," she said as I pulled out the metal chair opposite her. "Harassment." "Go ahead," I said, placing my handbag on the table. "But tell them to bring a forensic team. I have the Nokia, Sienna." Her thumb hovered over the screen. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking genuinely pale, not just the filter-ready pallor she used for Instagram. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her eyes darted to the door. "Stop it," I said. My voice was low, cutting through the noise of the espresso machine. "The act works on TikTok. It doesn't work on me. You were the handler. You made sure he didn't fall in love for real. You made sure he stuck to the timeline. Did you know about my mother? Did you authorize that?" Sienna let out a sharp, nervous laugh. "You give him too much credit. Dominic is a golden retriever. He does what he's told for a treat. He didn't kill anyone. He just facilitated things." She reached for her oat milk latte, and as she did, she shifted her purse slightly on the table. The movement was subtle, too subtle. I glanced at her purse. The clasp was open. The lens of her iPhone was peeking out, aimed directly at my face. The voice memo app was running. She was trying to bait me. She wanted a soundbite of Madeline Sterling threatening a young woman. "Nice try," I said, reaching across the table. I didn't grab the phone. I grabbed her wrist. I squeezed, just hard enough to make her wince. "If you post that recording," I whispered, leaning in so close I could smell her vanilla perfume, "I will release the wire transfer records from Aurora Consulting to your personal account. Federal prison isn't a good look for an influencer, Sienna. Orange washes you out." Sienna froze. She pulled her hand back and hurriedly zipped the purse. The recording stopped. "I want a name," I said, leaning back. "Who is the architect? Who were you reporting to?" Sienna looked around the cafe. She looked terrified, and for the first time I believed her fear wasn't faked. "I never met him," she hissed. "It was always text, voice modulators, dead drops." "But you know something," I pressed. "You know who signs the checks." She hesitated, biting her lip. She grabbed a napkin and a pen. She didn't speak. She scribbled 2 letters on the paper, slid it across the sticky table, and then stood up. "I'm leaving town," she said, her voice trembling. "If you're smart, you will too. They don't leave loose ends." She ran out of the shop, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully. I looked down at the napkin. 2 letters were scrawled in black ink. E.T. I stared at them. Elias Thorne. It fit. It fit the bank video. It fit the business rivalry. But as I stared at the letters, a cold knot formed in my stomach. It felt too easy. Too neat. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe that the man I had sat next to at board meetings for 20 years was capable of this. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate, and maddening. Tap, tap, tap. Elias Thorne sat at the far end of the 40-foot mahogany table, idly tapping the gold cap of his Mont Blanc pen against the polished wood. He was looking at me, his eyes crinkling with a concern that felt about as genuine as a $3 bill. "E.T.," I thought, staring at the monogram on his cufflink. "Elias Thorne." "Madeline," Elias said, his voice smooth, filling the silence of the boardroom. "We're all incredibly sympathetic to your situation. The news about Dominic is distressing, but the board is concerned about stability. The stock dropped 4 points this morning." "The stock fluctuates, Elias," I said, keeping my hands folded on the table to hide the tremor. It will stabilize once the press release goes out, clarifying that the fraud was personal, not corporate. Is it personal? Elias leaned forward, the tapping stopping abruptly. We heard rumors about a federal inquiry into the foundation's accounts. If the feds freeze the corporate assets, we're dead in the water. Perhaps it would be best if you took a leave of absence. Just until the dust settles. The trap was sprung. He didn't want to help, he wanted the chair. I looked around the room. 12 men and women I had known for decades. They avoided my gaze. They were looking at their iPads, checking the numbers. They smelled blood. A leave of absence? I repeated, my voice sharpening. So you can install your own team? Tell me, Elias, was that the plan when you walked into the bank vault with my husband 2 days ago? The room went dead silent. A young secretary in the corner stopped typing. Elias didn't flinch. He smiled, a slow, predatory baring of teeth. I was at the bank to check my own safety deposit box, Madeline. I bumped into Dominic in the lobby. We exchanged pleasantries. Is that a crime now? You exchanged more than pleasantries, I pushed, standing up. The last will is missing. Did he give it to you? Is that why you're pushing for a vote of no confidence today? Madeline, Elias said, his tone shifting from concern to pity. You sound unhinged. You're seeing conspiracies because you can't accept that your husband simply stole from you. It's a tragedy, but don't drag this company down with your marriage. He looked at the other board members. She's under immense stress. Perhaps she's not fit to lead right now. I saw the heads nodding. I had made a mistake. I had attacked without the smoking gun, and now I looked like a paranoid, scorned woman. If they voted today, I would lose. I had to pivot. Immediately. I let my shoulders slump. I reached for the glass of water, letting my hand shake visibly, spilling a few drops on the leather agenda. You're right, I whispered, sitting back down heavily. I pressed a hand to my forehead. Forgive me, gentlemen. The medication the doctor gave me for the shock. It makes me foggy. The aggression in the room evaporated, replaced by awkward discomfort. Men like Elias knew how to fight a shark. They didn't know how to fight a grieving, fragile widow. I think I need to go home, I said, looking up with wide, watery eyes. We can table the vote until next week? Please. Elias looked disappointed, but he couldn't press the attack without looking like a monster. Of course, Madeline. Take the week. Rest. I walked out of the boardroom, leaning on the doorframe for effect. The moment the elevator doors closed, my posture straightened. The tears vanished. He took the bait, I said to the empty car. He thinks I'm broken. Back in my office, William was waiting with Marcus. You bought us a week, William said, handing me a tablet. But we have a problem. I traced the ET lead. Elias Thorne did transfer money to the Cayman Islands, but it was for a yacht purchase. It's legitimate. He's a vulture, Madeline, but I don't think he's the architect. Then who is? I paced the room, looking at the city skyline. Sienna wrote ET on that napkin. Maybe she didn't mean a name, Marcus said from the corner. Maybe she meant a designation. Before I could ask what he meant, my desktop computer chimed. A single email appeared in my secure inbox. No subject. Sender, unknown. I clicked it open. There was no text. Just a scanned image of an old photograph. It was a photo of me and Dominic at the Met Gala, 10 years ago. The moment we met. The moment he spilled the champagne. But the photo was taken from a distance, from a balcony. It was a surveillance shot, and underneath the photo, typed in the body of the email, was a single line. Stop looking for E.T. Look for the person who introduced you. I froze. The person who introduced us. My aunt, Clara. The attic smelled of cedar and decaying paper. Rain drummed against the slate roof, a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in my temples. I sat on the floor, surrounded by leather-bound albums, looking for the origin of the lie. I found it in the 2015 album, a photo taken 3 weeks before the gala. My Aunt Clara, standing by her vintage Jaguar on the side of a country road in Connecticut. A young man was kneeling by the wheel, changing a flat tire. He was smiling at the camera. It was Dominic. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Dominic didn't know how to change a tire. We once waited 3 hours for AAA on the Long Island Expressway because he didn't know how to use a jack. He had staged the flat tire. He had staged the rescue. He had targeted Clara first to get to me. I drove to the Whispering Pines, the memory care facility where Clara lived. The lobby smelled of expensive lilies and aggressive antiseptic. Clara was in the solarium staring at a bird feeder. She was 80, frail as a dried leaf, her mind eroded by dementia. "Aunt Clara?" I sat beside her, taking her cold, thin hand. She turned, her eyes milky and vague. "Is it tea time?" "Not yet," I said softly. I placed the photo on the small table between us. "Do you remember him? The boy who fixed your car?" Clara looked at the photo. A flicker of recognition sparked in the fog. "The nice boy, with the beautiful manners. He brought me flowers." "Did he ask to meet me, Clara?" "He said he was lonely," she murmured, tracing Dominic's face. "He said he wanted a sophisticated woman, like my niece. He asked so many questions about you, about the foundation." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was Marcus. I pulled her old phone records. In the month before she introduced you, she received 14 calls from the architect number. They were coaching her, Madeline. I felt a surge of nausea. They had weaponized a lonely old woman. "Who was he talking to, Clara?" I pressed, leaning in closer. "Who told him where to find you?" Clara frowned, pulling her hand away. "The man on the phone, the one with the deep voice. He said it was a surprise for Maddie." "Who?" I asked, my voice rising. I grabbed her wrist, desperate for a name. "Who was the man on the phone? Was it Elias?" Clara flinched, her eyes widening in terror. "You're hurting me." "I don't know. Stop it." "The bad man said not to tell." She started to hyperventilate, looking around for a nurse. I froze. I was doing exactly what they did. I was bullying her. I let go of her wrist. I took a deep breath, forcing the panic down. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Auntie." I began to hum. It was an old lullaby she used to sing to me when my parents were traveling. "Lavender's blue, dilly dilly." Clara's breathing slowed. The terror drained from her face, replaced by a childlike calm. She rocked back and forth, humming along. "He wasn't alone," she whispered suddenly, her eyes lucid for a brief, terrifying second. "The nice boy, he had a friend, the one who paid for the ring." "What friend?" I asked gently, not stopping the melody. "The one from the bank," she said, closing her eyes. "Mr. E.T. didn't like the boy, but he needed him." She drifted off, her chin dropping to her chest. I sat there, the lullaby dying in my throat. Mr. E.T. didn't like the boy, but he needed him. It confirmed everything and nothing at the same time. My phone rang again. It was William. I walked out into the corridor to answer. "Tell me you have good news." "I don't." William's voice was grave. "Dominic just posted bail." I stopped walking. "That's impossible." "The judge set it at $5 million cash. His assets are frozen. He has nothing." "Someone paid it, Madeline. A wire transfer from a shell company in Panama hit the court's account 10 minutes ago. He's walking out of Rikers within the hour." I looked back at my aunt sleeping in the chair. "They didn't bail him out because they care about him," I said, a cold clarity settling over me. "They bailed him out because he still has something they need, or because they want to silence him before he talks to us." "Where are you going?" William asked. "To the courthouse," I said, heading for the exit. "I'm not letting him disappear." The heels of my Louboutins struck the marble floor of the Southern District Courthouse like gunshots. Click, click, click. I wasn't walking, I was marching. William struggled to keep up, clutching his briefcase. "Madeline, slow down. The clerk said the paperwork is already processed. We might be too late to file an objection." "I don't care about the paperwork," I said, pushing through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B. "I care about the $5 million that just materialized out of thin air." The courtroom was sparsely populated. A few board reporters, a sketch artist, and in the front row, a legal team that cost more per hour than most people earned in a year. And there he was. Dominic wasn't wearing the orange jumpsuit of a remand prisoner. He was dressed in a navy bespoke suit, crisp and perfectly tailored. He stood at the defense table, whispering to a lawyer I recognized. Tobacco-stained teeth, pinstripes, a reputation for burying witnesses. Dominic turned. He saw me. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look like the man who'd begged for my forgiveness in the holding cell call just days ago. He smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a message: "You missed your shot." "All rise," the bailiff droned. Judge Holloway took the bench, looking over his spectacles. "I see bail has been posted in the full amount of $5 million. The court acknowledges receipt of funds from Vega Holdings?" "A legitimate investment firm, Your Honor," Dominic's lawyer said smoothly. "They believe in Mr. Sterling's innocence and his value to the business community. He's a flight risk." I stood up, ignoring William's hand on my arm. He has offshore accounts. He has a second identity. Mrs. Sterling, the judge banged his gavel. Sit down or be removed. The prosecution has not provided evidence of these alleged second identities. As of now, money talks. Bail is granted. I sank back into the hard wooden bench. My hand went to my purse. I could feel the outline of the burner phone inside. The Nokia brick, the proof of the conspiracy. I have the phone, I hissed to William. I can show the judge right now. The texts, the coordinates. No, William whispered harshly, gripping my wrist. We can't. We found it illegally. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. If you present it now, the defense will move to suppress it, and they'll win. Worse, they'll know we have it and destroy the other end of the connection. I looked at Dominic. He was signing papers, looking relaxed. Too relaxed. Why would a shadow organization spend $5 million to bail out a burned asset? A spy who gets caught is usually cut loose. Unless he wasn't finished. They didn't buy his freedom, I said, a cold realization settling in my chest. They bought his access. There's something he still needs to do for them. Something he can't do from a cell. The hearing ended in 10 minutes. Dominic walked out a free man, flanked by his legal team. He didn't look back at me again. We rushed out the side exit to the street. The New York drizzle had turned into a steady gray rain. Reporters were swarming the front steps, cameras flashing. There, Marcus said. He was waiting in my sedan at the curb, engine idling. Dominic ignored the press. He descended the stairs and ducked into a waiting black Range Rover with tinted windows. No license plates. Follow him, I commanded, sliding into the back seat. The Range Rover pulled into traffic, aggressive and fast. He's not going home to pack, William noted, watching the car weave through a yellow light. No, I said, watching the red taillights of the Range Rover blur in the rain. He's going to work. The Holland Tunnel was a claustrophobic throat swallowing us whole, spitting us out into the gray, industrial wasteland of New Jersey. The rain here was heavier, mixing with the grime of the turnpike to coat the windshield in an oily smear. He's exiting, Marcus said from the front seat, his eyes glued to the tracking dot on his iPad. Exit 14, the docks. We followed the black Range Rover into a labyrinth of rusted shipping containers and abandoned warehouses. This wasn't a place for meetings, it was a place for disposing of things you didn't want found. Dominic's car slowed, then turned into the open bay of a corrugated metal structure that looked like it hadn't seen a safety inspector since the 80s. Kill the lights, I whispered. William cut the engine of our sedan, letting us glide silently into the shadow of a stacked container, 50 yards away. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thwack-thwack of our wipers settling into place. I raised the Leica binoculars to my eyes. Dominic stepped out of the Range Rover. He opened a large black umbrella, shielding himself from the leaks in the warehouse roof. He walked toward a parked sedan, an old Lincoln Town car that looked out of place among the forklifts. The rear window of the Lincoln rolled down, a hand emerged, pale, skeletal. Then, a face. I gasped, the binoculars trembling in my hands. The man in the car was wearing a clear plastic oxygen mask, a portable tank hissing beside him on the leather seat. His skin was translucent, his eyes sunken. Who is it? William asked, leaning forward. Arthur Vance, I said, my voice cold. My father's CFO. Dad fired him 20 years ago for embezzling pension funds. I thought he was dead. He's not dead, Marcus muttered, typing furiously. He's the registered agent for Vega Holdings, the company that posted the bail. Look, I said. Dominic reached into the backseat of his car and pulled out a long cylindrical tube. Architectural blueprints. He handed the tube to Vance. Vance took it with a shaking hand, nodding slowly. He didn't look like a mastermind. He looked like a ghost feeding on vengeance. Suddenly, Dominic froze. He turned his head sharply, looking directly toward our dark corner of the lot. He sees us, William hissed. The reflection on the binoculars. Dominic took a step toward us, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Panic spiked in my chest. We were unarmed. We were exposed. Do something, I ordered. William didn't hesitate. He didn't start the car. Instead, he slammed his hand onto the horn and held it down, a long, blaring note that echoed violently off the metal containers. Then, he threw the car into reverse and slammed the rear bumper hard into a metal dumpster behind us. Crash! It was a clumsy, loud, amateur noise. the noise of a drunk driver or a lost delivery truck. It worked. Dominic flinched, stopping his advance. He looked at Vance, who waved a dismissive hand, signaling him to get back in the car. They assumed we were just a random nuisance, not a threat. Dominic jumped back into the Range Rover. Both cars peeled out of the warehouse, speeding away in opposite directions. We sat in the silence, breathing hard. That was effective, Marcus exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. I got the audio from the directional mic before you honked. He pressed a key on his laptop. The sound of rain filled the car, followed by Dominic's voice, tinny and distant. The structural weakness is on the 40th floor. The concrete hasn't cured yet. If the charges are placed on the support beams tonight, the whole North Tower comes down. I stared at the dashboard. The tube contained the plans for the new Sterling Tower, my legacy project. A billion-dollar skyscraper currently under construction in Midtown. They aren't trying to steal the company, I said, watching the rain wash away their tire tracks. They're trying to destroy it. They want to bring the tower down to bankrupt me. He said, tonight, William said, checking his watch. Madeline, the construction site is empty at night. Get us to Midtown, I told William, and call the police. Tell them there's a bomb threat. The Sterling Tower was screaming. It wasn't a human scream. It was the terrifying, high-pitched groan of steel under impossible pressure. I ducked under the yellow police tape, the mud from the construction site ruining my shoes instantly. Mrs. Sterling, you can't be here. O'Malley, the site foreman, ran toward me, his face smeared with grease and rain. He shoved a white hard hat into my hands. Report, O'Malley, I shouted over the wail of approaching sirens. What is that noise? It's the hydraulic jacks on the 40th floor, O'Malley yelled, pointing up into the darkness where the skeletal steel beams disappeared into the clouds. The computer system is going haywire. It's increasing the pressure on the uncured concrete. If those jacks push any harder, the support beams will buckle. The whole north face will shear off. Override it, William barked, shielding his eyes from the glare of the floodlights. We can't. O'Malley threw his radio down in frustration. The BMS is locked out. Someone has remote admin access. They're driving the system to self-destruct. We ran into the temporary site office, a converted shipping container filled with monitors and blueprints. Marcus was already there, his laptop plugged into the main server rack. I'm trying to kill the connection, Marcus said, typing furiously. But he's using a bouncing signal. Every time I block one IP, he jumps to another. He's fast. My phone rang. Unknown number. I put it on speaker. The room went quiet, save for the hum of the cooling fans and the distant groaning of the tower. Hello, Madeline. Dominic's voice filled the room. You hear that? That's the sound of $1 billion snapping in half. Stop this, Dominic, I said, leaning over the desk. There are people on the street below. If that debris falls, then sign the papers, he cut me off. Transfer the deed of the land to Vega Holdings, right now. I just emailed you the DocuSign link. You click. I stop the pressure, you hesitate, and the Sterling legacy becomes a pile of rubble on 57th Street. He wasn't negotiating, he was holding a gun to the head of my family's history. I looked at the monitors. The pressure gauges on the screen were in the red, climbing past 95%. I need time to read it, I lied, trying to buy Marcus seconds. You have 30 seconds, Dominic laughed. Tick-tock, Maddie. I looked at Marcus. He shook his head. I can't stop it in 30 seconds. He's encrypted the lockout. I looked at the server rack. It was a tower of blinking lights and humming hard drives, the brain of the building. Dominic was attacking through the software. He thought he was fighting a digital war. He forgot who owned the hardware. O'Malley, I turned to the foreman. The fire suppression system in this office. Is it chemical or water? It's a sprinkler system, O'Malley frowned. Water. Why? Marcus, unplug your laptop, I ordered. What? Marcus looked up. Unplug it. Now. I grabbed a heavy metal wrench from the foreman's desk. I didn't wait for permission. I swung the wrench upwards, smashing the glass bulb of the sprinkler head directly above the server rack. Hiss! A torrent of dirty, pressurized water exploded from the ceiling. It cascaded down onto the server rack. The reaction was instant. Sparks flew, smoke hissed. The humming of the drives turned into a dying screech as the electronics short-circuited. On the monitors, the red gauges flickered and went black. The screens died. Outside, the groaning of the steel stopped. The hydraulic jacks, deprived of their signal, froze in place. The room was silent, except for the sound of dripping water. We were soaked. The server was a smoking ruin. You just fried a $2 million system," O'Malley whispered, staring at the wreckage. "I just saved a $1 billion building," I replied, wiping water from my face. "Without the signal, the jacks hold steady. We can release the pressure manually." I looked at my phone. The call was still active. Dominic was still there. He was breathing hard. He knew he had lost control. "Madeline?" He whispered. "You're fired," I said into the phone. "We got him," Marcus shouted, pointing to his battery-powered backup tablet. "He stayed on the line too long. The signal triangulated before the server died. I have a physical address." I looked at the map on the screen. The blue dot was pulsing at a penthouse on Park Avenue. My penthouse. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded obscenely cheerful given the hour. It was 2 a.m. I stepped into my own foyer. The air was different, stale, tainted. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and triumph. My living room, usually a sanctuary of white orchids and silence, was now a command center. Dominic sat on my white sofa, boots up on the coffee table. He held a crystal tumbler of my oldest scotch. Across from him, Arthur Vance sat in a wheelchair, the oxygen tank hissing rhythmically beside him. He looked like a corpse that had forgotten to lie down. "You're late," Dominic said, swirling the amber liquid. "I expected you an hour ago. Did the fire truck slow you down?" "The fire is out," I said, walking past him to the bar. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. The rage was a physical thing, a tight knot in my chest that threatened to suffocate me. And so am I. William stood by the elevator, silent, his hand gripping his briefcase. "Smart girl," Vance wheezed, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. The sterling blood always knew when to cut losses. "I have the transfer papers," I said, turning to face them. I pulled a thick document from my bag. "Full control of the Sterling Tower, the foundation assets, the liquid cash. It's all here." I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. Dominic sat up. The arrogance in his eyes was blinding. He didn't see a wife, he saw a conquered province. He reached for the folder. He flipped through the pages, scanning the legal jargon. Clause 4. Irrevocable transfer. Yes, this looks standard. He pulled a pen from his pocket. "Use mine," I said softly, sliding a heavy silver pen across the glass table. "It was a gift from my father. It seems fitting he should sign away his legacy." Dominic smirked. He picked up the silver pen. "Sentimental to the end, Maddie," he signed. Then he handed the folder to Vance, who signed as a witness, his hand trembling with age and greed. "Done," Dominic said, capping the pen. "Now get out of my house." I didn't move. I poured myself a glass of water. "Actually, Dominic," I said, my voice steady, "you might want to read the appendix on the last page, the one you just initialed." Dominic frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You didn't sign a transfer of ownership to Vega Holdings," I said, taking a sip of water. "You signed a sworn affidavit admitting to wire fraud, industrial sabotage, and the attempted murder of my father via medical negligence." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hiss of Vance's oxygen. That's not possible," Dominic stammered, ripping the folder open again. He looked at the page. The text was there, clear as day. "You didn't read it," I said, stepping closer. "You were so hungry for the win, so convinced I was weak, that you didn't read the fine print. And that pen? It's not just a pen. It's a digital recorder. It's been streaming audio to the NYPD Cyber Crimes Unit since I walked in the door." Dominic's face turned a violent shade of red. The mask of the sophisticated spy crumbled, revealing the thug underneath. He roared, launching himself off the sofa. He didn't reach for the papers. He reached into his jacket. "Gun!" William shouted. Dominic pulled a small silver pistol. He aimed it directly at my chest. "Undo it," he screamed, his hand shaking. "Rip it up, or I swear to God, Madeline, I will." Crash! The floor-to-ceiling windows of the balcony shattered inward. Stun grenades rolled across the floor. Bang! Bang! Blinding white light filled the room. Smoke billowed. "Police, drop the weapon." Men in tactical gear poured in from the balcony and the service entrance. Red laser dots danced across Dominic's chest. He froze. He looked at me, then at the gun, then at the dozen rifles pointed at his head. I didn't flinch. I stood amidst the broken glass and smoke, watching him. "It's over, Dominic," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "The target acquired you." He dropped the gun. It clattered on the floor, sounding pitifully small. As they tackled him, slamming his face into the rug he used to claim he loved, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't happiness. It was the heavy, exhausting relief of survival. The crosscut shredder in my office hummed a hungry mechanical sound that felt surprisingly therapeutic. Whir, grind, silence. I fed the last photograph into the slot. It was the wedding portrait, the one where we stood on the steps of the plaza, looking like the cover of a fairy tale. The machine didn't care about the nostalgia. It turned the memory into a pile of gray confetti in 3 seconds. I brushed the paper dust from my hands. "The house is clean," I said to the empty room. I hadn't slept in 48 hours, but I didn't feel tired. I felt light. The kind of weightlessness that comes after dropping a heavy pack you've been carrying for a decade. 2 hours later, I sat in the visitation room of the Metropolitan Correctional Center. The glass partition was thick, scratched, and smeared with the grease of 1,000 desperate pleas. Dominic sat on the other side. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a beige jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. Without the tailor, without the expensive haircut, without the Rolex, he looked ordinary. He looked like a stranger. He picked up the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking. I stared at the receiver on my side of the glass. I didn't pick it up. Dominic's eyes widened. He mouthed words at me. "Madeline, please." "I can explain. Vance made me." He tapped the glass. He shouted, his face contorted in ugly, desperate rage. The veins in his neck bulged. I just watched. I studied him like a specimen in a jar. I realized I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't looking for closure. I was just confirming that he was real, and that he was gone. He was screaming now, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. The guard stepped forward, grabbing his shoulder. I stood up. I buttoned my cashmere coat. I placed my hand on the glass for a fleeting second, not in affection but in dismissal. Then I turned my back on him. I didn't look back as the guard dragged him away. That evening, the air at the Hudson River Park was crisp. The lights of Jersey City twinkled across the dark water, a mirror to the chaos we had just survived. William and Marcus were waiting for me on a bench near the railing. They were eating tacos from a food truck, passing a bottle of sparkling water between them. "Fancy dinner," I smiled, sitting beside them. "Best in the city," William said, handing me a foil-wrapped taco. "How was he?" "Small," I said. "He was very small." Marcus reached into his pocket. He pulled out the Nokia burner phone. The electrical tape was gone. The screen was dark. "I scrubbed it," Marcus said. "Military-grade wipe. No contacts, no texts, no coordinates. It's just a piece of plastic now. The architect's number is dead. The line is cut." I took the phone. It felt light in my hand. For 2 weeks, this object had been a source of terror. It was the artifact of my betrayal. Now, it was just trash. "What about the company?" William asked, watching a ferry cut through the water. "The board is terrified. Elias sent flowers." "Elias can keep his flowers," I said, looking at the skyline. "I'm dissolving the board. We're going private. No more sharks, just us." I stood up and walked to the railing. The river below was black and churning, moving relentlessly toward the ocean. I held the phone over the water. "You know," I said, feeling the wind catch my hair, "I spent 10 years trying to be the woman he wanted, the perfect wife, the perfect CEO. I thought if I was perfect enough, I would be safe." "And now?" William asked softly. I looked at my reflection in the dark water. I saw the lines on my face. I saw the tiredness. But mostly, I saw the steel. "Now I don't want to be safe," I said. "I want to be free." I opened my hand. The phone fell. It hit the water with a barely audible plip and vanished instantly beneath the surface. I turned back to them. To my real family. "Come on," I said, linking arms with William. "I still have the key to the wine cellar, and I believe we have a 1982 Bordeaux that needs to breathe." We walked away from the river, leaving the ghosts in the water, stepping into the bright, loud, messy city that was finally, truly mine. 6 months later, the rooftop garden of the Sterling Tower was in full bloom. It didn't look like a crime scene anymore. It looked like a sanctuary floating 1,000 feet above Manhattan. I knelt in the dirt, planting white hydrangeas. The soil felt real and grounding in my hands. There were no wires here, no cameras, no hackers trying to bring the steel beams crashing down. just the wind and the smell of wet earth. William sat on a teak bench nearby, reading a book. He wasn't billing me by the hour, he was just there. "You missed a spot," he teased, pointing to a weed near the trellis. "I'm leaving it," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "A garden needs a few weeds to remind the flowers how lucky they are." I stood up and looked at the skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of lavender and gold. The fear that had gripped my chest for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady rhythm. I had learned the hardest way possible that you cannot build a life on a foundation of secrets. As the old proverb says, truth is like oil. No matter how much water you pour over it, it will always float to the top. Dominic tried to drown me in lies, but he forgot that I knew how to float. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea. The air was cool, the city noise just a distant hum. "It's finally over, William," I smiled, handing him a glass. "Peace, real peace." William didn't take the glass, he was staring at his iPad. The color had drained from his face. The stillness in the garden suddenly felt heavy. "William?" I asked. He didn't answer. He went completely quiet. His eyes were locked on a notification that had just flashed across his secure server. He set his glass down. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He simply opened his legal filing app, typed a single, rapid command, and hit execute. "What did you just do?" I whispered. William looked up at me, and for the first time in 20 years, he looked afraid. "I just filed a freeze order on your personal trust," he said softly, "because the architect just pinged again. And this time, the signal isn't coming from outside the building, Madeline. It's coming from inside your office."